You know, in our world today, we try to keep death at a safe distance. We soften the words, passed away, gone to a better place. We scroll past it in the news, convincing ourselves it belongs to someone else's story, not ours. Funerals are quiet, polite, almost clinical. We step in, whisper a prayer, and hurry back to the noise of life, as if silence might invite the shadow closer. But 2,500 years ago, the ancient Greeks faced it differently. To them, death wasn't a wall. It wasn't the black curtain at the end of the show. It wasn't even a final goodbye. It was a doorway, and beyond that doorway, 3 bridges. They believed every soul yours, mine would stand before the first of these bridges. And to reach the other side, to be reborn into something new, you'd have to cross all 3. Now, maybe you're thinking, that's just an old myth. What does it have to do with me? But here's the truth. These bridges aren't only about what happens after your last heartbeat. They're about now. They're about the moments you've already faced, moments that changed you forever. Think about it. The first time you had to let go of someone you loved. The moment you realized a dream you'd been chasing was gone. The day you looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back. Those were bridges, too. And each crossing demanded something from you, your comfort, your pride, maybe even your sense of who you were. The Greeks wrapped the truth in story, in the language of rivers, judges, and choices. They knew that transformation doesn't happen in an instant, it comes in stages. Like the setting of the sun into night, and the slow coming of dawn after the longest dark. The first crossing teaches you to let go. The second forces you to face yourself. The third makes you decide what you'll carry forward, and what you'll leave behind forever. Picture this. You're standing on the edge of the world you've always known. Behind you is everything familiar, your family, your rituals, the patterns that shaped you. Ahead is a narrow bridge fading into the mist. You don't know where it ends. You don't even know if it can hold your weight. You can stay where you are, safe, but stuck. Or you can step onto that bridge, into the unknown. The ancient Greeks believed the soul always chose the bridge because standing still was a kind of death all its own. To refuse to walk was to wither, to become less than alive. And here's the thing. You don't have to wait for the end of your life to see these bridges. They're here. In the day you forgive without getting an apology. In the moment you walk away from something that's breaking you, even when it's all you've ever known. In the instant you admit to yourself, I cannot go back. I must move forward. Each of these is a crossing. Each changes you. Sometimes quietly, like water shaping stone. Sometimes violently, like fire remaking metal. So why do we still talk about death? Because it's the greatest bridge of all, and knowing it's there helps us see the smaller ones in our daily lives. Because it reminds us that time is short, and the bridges won't wait forever. The Greeks weren't afraid to imagine it. They didn't hide it. They painted it in their myths, carved it in their rituals, whispered it in their prayers to the gods. Death was not an enemy, but a teacher. And if we let it, it can teach us, too. Tonight, I'm not here to tell you exactly what's beyond that final bridge. No storyteller, no priest, no philosopher can map that land with certainty. What I can give you is the map the Greeks left us, a map of 3 crossings. In the parts to come, we'll walk them together step by step. You'll see the rivers, the ferrymen, the judges, the choices. You'll learn what each crossing demands and what it gives back in return. And maybe, by the end, you'll see that the afterlife isn't just waiting for you later. It's already herein, every moment you choose to change, in every bridge you dare to cross while your heart still beats. So let me ask you, if tonight was the night you had to cross your first bridge, would you take the step? Would you place your foot on the plank, knowing it might shake, knowing it might break, but also knowing it might lead you to a version of yourself you've never met? Because in the end, the Greeks believed this. The soul was never meant to stay on the shore. When the ancient Greeks spoke of the soul, they didn't use the word the way we do today. For us, the soul is often imagined as a vague, untouchable spirit, something invisible, something poetic, something perhaps even fragile. But for them, the psyche was not an abstract concept. It was a living traveler, a force that moved, felt, remembered, and changed. The word psyche itself meant breath or life force. To the Greeks, breath was proof of life. As long as air flowed in and out of the chest, the body moved, spoke, dreamed. When that breath slipped away, the body stilled, but the psyche did not vanish. It had places to be. It had a road to walk. And here is something striking. The Greeks did not imagine the soul as perfect, complete, or untouchable. They saw it as a student, a wanderer, a being in constant motion, shaped and reshaped by what it endured. Over lifetimes, the soul would learn, forget, and learn again. In Homer's Odyssey, the dead appear as shadows thin, voiceless figures drifting in a dim land. But centuries later, thinkers like Pythagoras and Plato gave the psyche more substance. They spoke of its choices, its trials, its rebirths. The soul, they said, was not a ghost fading into silence. It was a traveler on a long, winding road toward something greater. This was not just religion, it was philosophy. It was the idea that existence itself was an education. That every loss, every joy, every mistake was part of the soul's curriculum. And this is where the three bridges enter the story. The first bridge, it takes you out of the world you know. The second, it places you face to face with truth. The third, it asks you what you will carry into your next life. To the Greeks, the afterlife was not simply a reward for the good or a punishment for the wicked. It was an initiation, a process, a slow refinement. Every test was meant to shape the soul, make it lighter, wiser, freer. You might ask, how did they imagine all this? How did mortals look into the invisible and map such a journey? Part of it came from what they observed in life. They saw how people changed after war, after heartbreak, after great victories. They saw how grief stripped away illusions, how suffering carved wisdom into the face, how love could transform even the hardest spirit. If these crossings happened in life, why not in death? Part of it came from the mystery traditions. In secret rites like those of Orpheus or Eleusis, initiates were led through symbolic death and rebirth. They would enter in darkness, undergo trials, face the terror of the unknown, and emerge with new eyes. Those who experienced it said they no longer feared death. Why? Because they had already crossed the bridges in their hearts. And part of it, too, came from imagination, the poets, philosophers, storytellers weaving images of rivers and judges and choices to give shape to what the human heart already felt, but could not fully say. What fascinates me is how human this vision remains. Because whether or not you believe in reincarnation, you've walked this path. You've left behind one chapter and stepped into another, not knowing if you'd survive the transition. That was the first bridge. You've had nights when you looked into yourself, stripped of excuses, forced to admit truths you'd rather bury. That was the second. You've chosen what lessons to keep, what wounds to release, what memories to carry. That was the third. This is the psyche's work. This is its long pilgrimage. The Greeks saw the soul as resilient. It could falter, stumble, even lose its way, but it was never ruined. It could return. Again and again, lifetime after lifetime, it could walk forward. Each time, it came a little closer to what it was meant to become. That is why, in their art, the psyche is often drawn as a small-winged, figure delicate, yes, but always in flight. Wings are not decoration. Wings mean movement. And movement means there is always another horizon. So, when the Greeks spoke of the soul, they weren't only whispering about death. They were reminding themselves and us that every breath is part of a journey, that we are not static creatures, that inside us lives a traveler who will not stop until it finds its way home. And perhaps that is why, even now, when we stand at our own crossroads, we still reach for their language. The bridges, the rivers, the judges. These images echo because they speak to something universal, the deep knowledge that the soul is not finished. It is never finished. It is learning. It is wandering. It is becoming. And if that is true, then death itself is not an end. It is only another classroom.
Most people hear about the first bridge and assume it lies far away as something that waits patiently at the very end of our lives. Something you only see when your body draws its final breath. But the truth? You've already been there. Not once, not twice, many times. The first bridge appears every time life forces you to leave something behind. It doesn't announce itself with thunder or prophecy. It comes quietly, disguised as change. It's the promotion you didn't get after years of trying, leaving you to question who you are without that title. It's the move to a new city where you don't know a soul, where even the streets refuse to call you by name. It's the quiet, aching moment when you realize a chapter of your life is over and no amount of longing will bring it back. The Greeks imagined this bridge stretching across the river Styx, or the Acherondos dark. Legendary waters that separated the living from the dead. But if you strip away the myth, you see something truer. The river is change itself. And change always asks for a toll. In their stories, the ferryman Charon waits at the shore, his hand outstretched. No judgment, no speeches, just a palm, steady and expectant. Without the coin, you cannot cross. Without payment, you wander. And in our lives, the coin is whatever we must give up to move forward. Sometimes it is comfort the easy life you've built, the routines that make you feel safe. Sometimes it is control the illusion that you can script every outcome. Sometimes it is a version of yourself you've outgrown, even if you still cling to its skin. And here's the hardest truth. Most of us try to bargain. We whisper to ourselves, maybe I can keep the old and still have the new. Maybe I can step forward while still holding backward. But the first bridge doesn't work that way. You either step onto it fully, or you don't move at all. I've stood at that bridge myself. Perhaps you have too. For me, it was the moment I had to leave behind something I thought defined me, a career I had sacrificed for, a relationship I believed was permanent, a dream I once thought essential. I didn't know who I would be on the other side. The fear was sharp, real. But the crossing taught me something simple and brutal. You cannot discover your next self while clinging to your old one. The Greeks would have nodded at that lesson. They believed the first bridge strips away what no longer belongs to you, even if you resist, even if it feels like being torn apart. What is not meant for the soul will fall away, one way or another. Think about how their myths describe the souls at this stage. Quiet, subdued, walking slowly toward the crossing. No one rushes. No one runs. They know this is serious, and maybe that's how we should treat the first bridge in our own lives. Not as something to rush through, but as a moment to honor what we are leaving. Grieve, if you must. Weep for the chapter that is closing. Celebrate what was good, even as you set it down. And then, when your heart has acknowledged the weights of the past step forward, of course, some refuse. In the myths, souls without the toll coin wander endlessly at the riverbank, shadows unable to move on. And in life, don't we do the same? We replay old memories like broken records. We stay in relationships long past their ending. We keep standing at the shore, whispering, "I'm not ready!" But readiness is a myth. The first bridge teaches us that waiting will not make the step easier. Time does not shrink the river. The only way to cross is to accept the toll and step in. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is your first bridge today? Is it a relationship you know you must release, even though love lingers in the air? Is it a dream that no longer excites you, though you've clung to it for years? Is it a chapter you've delayed closing, hoping against hope that it will somehow reopen? The Greeks would tell you, the bridge is already here. The longer you hesitate at the edge, the heavier your feet become. And yet, there's a gift hidden in this crossing. On the other side, you will be lighter, not because nothing was lost, but because you have learned the truth. You can survive the letting go. That's why, in their stories, the souls step off the bridge into a calmer land, a place where the weight of the past dissolves. That calm is not a reward for obedience. It is the natural freedom that comes when you finally stop dragging what cannot be carried. The first bridge is closer than you think. It is not waiting at the hour of death. It is waiting in your decisions today. And the only question is, will you take the step?
In Greek myth, the first bridge doesn't float in empty air. It stretches across something deeper, darker, water. The ancients gave this water many names. The river Styx, the river Acheron, but whatever its name, it was always a boundary, a threshold. A mirror for the soul. The Styx was no ordinary river. Its waters carried such power that even the gods themselves swore oaths upon it. To break a promise sealed by the Styx was unthinkable. It brought punishments even immortals could not endure. To the Greeks, that river was truth itself, absolute, unforgiving, unshakable, the Acheron. By contrast, was called the river of woe. It was sorrow made liquid, flowing endlessly between one world and the next. To step onto its banks was to feel the last warmth of the sun fading from your skin, to know you were leaving laughter, love, and familiarity behind. But look closer, and you'll see, we don't need to be dead to understand this river. You, and I know it's chill. It is that quiet, trembling moment before you make a decision that will change everything. The phone call you've been avoiding, because you know it will alter the course of your life. The letter you write with shaking hands, knowing once you send it, nothing will ever be the same. The door you close behind you, aware it may never open again. That is the river, and in the myths, no soul could cross alone. Waiting on the bank was Charon, the ferryman. He was not cruel, but neither was he tender. His task was simple, to carry those who were ready and only those who were ready. His silence was a test. His presence alone forced the soul to decide. The toll was a single coin, placed under the tongue or over the eyes before burial. Without it, the soul lingered on the bank, restless, unfinished, unable to begin its journey. And in our lives, the toll is not metal. It is not silver or gold. It is the invisible cost of change. It might be humility, the moment you admit you cannot do this alone. It might be trust when you step forward without any guarantee. It might be sacrifice when you leave behind something good for the possibility of something better. Here is what we forget. The river is not punishment. It is witness. It marks the moment when one life ends and another begins. Crossing the water is not about losing it, is about acknowledging. This is the point of no return. But here's the danger. Many of us try to cheat the river. We stand with one foot on the shore and one in the boat, telling ourselves we can belong to both worlds. We want the safety of the familiar, but also the promise of the new. We cling to both sides, thinking hesitation will buy us time. The Greeks knew better. They believed hesitation meant becoming trapped forever, wandering the bank, neither alive in the old life nor reborn in the new. I think of times when I lingered at the edge of my own river, when I told myself I just need more time. But time does not shrink the distance. Time does not soften the current. Time does not carry you across. The only way forward is to step into the boat, pay the toll, and trust that the other shore will rise to meet you. And once you arrive, once your foot touches the far bank, there is no going back. That is why the image of the river carried so much power. It was the ultimate line drawn across existence. So let me ask you, what river are you standing beside right now? What toll have you been afraid to pay? And, more importantly, what will it cost you if you never cross? Because in Greek myth, crossing the river stripped the soul bare. No old names, no old titles, no shields of status or possessions. On the far shore, you were simply yourself, a traveler, a soul, nothing more, nothing less. And maybe that is the lesson we are meant to keep. That, when you want to step into a new life, you cannot bring every piece of the old one with you. Some things must sink into the water. Some burdens must be left behind. The river we all must cross is not just a myth of death, it is a truth of life. You will stand at its banks again and again. Each time you will feel the weight of the toll. Each time you will fear the current. And each time you will discover that the only way to honor your life is to move forward, across the water, toward the unknown. In the Greek story, Charon the ferryman never shouted, never threatened. He simply waited. Hand out, palm open. 1 coin. That was the price. The coin wasn't merely a payment, it was a ritual. Families of the dead placed it carefully, under the tongue or over the eyes, to ensure their loved one could cross the river. Without it, the soul wandered the banks, restless, unable to begin its journey. To the Greeks, this simple act was both sacred and practical. It acknowledged that no crossing came free. Now, pause and think about that coin. In our lives, we don't slip silver drachmas into our mouths before a great transition. But the truth remains. Every crossing demands a toll. Sometimes the toll is obvious. It is the steady job you must leave behind to chase a calling that burns brighter than comfort. It is the apartment you surrender to move across the country and begin again. It is the unhealthy habit you abandon to become someone stronger. Other times, the toll is hidden, subtler. It might be your pride you finally whisper, I cannot do this alone. It might be your certainty you step forward without knowing where the bridge leads. It might even be lover, relationship you cherish, but cannot carry into the future that waits for you. And here is the part we resist. The toll is always paid in advance. You don't get to cross first, and then decide what you're willing to let go. You hand it over before you see the other shore. That is why the Greeks placed the coin in the mouth of the dead. It was a declaration. I am ready to pay the price before I know what comes next. But haven't we all tried to negotiate with the ferryman? We whisper, maybe I can keep everything I have and still reach the new shore. Maybe I can bargain my way across. And yet, deep down, we know the truth. If we don't release something, we won't truly value what lies ahead. Think about it when you've sacrificed for something, when you've invested time, energy, or heart into it. You guard it more fiercely. You take the journey seriously. The toll ensures that what waits across the bridge matters. I remember a time when a great change called to me. It was thrilling, but it came with a steep cost, a steady paycheck. A city I loved, the comfort of a life I had carefully built. For weeks, I clung to both sides, telling myself there must be a way to keep it all. There wasn't. In the end, I had to hand over the coin, to release the familiar, to trust the crossing. Only then did the new chapter truly begin. The Greeks would have nodded knowingly. They understood that the toll is not meant to punish, but to free. Because often, what we release is the very thing keeping us bound to the wrong shore, and sometimes the toll is not torn from us, it is offered. Willingly, with courage. We see the change coming, and instead of resisting, we place the coin in Karen's hand ourselves. That's when the crossing becomes not an act of loss, but of empowerment. So let me ask you, what is your coin right now? Is it time, the hours you must devote to the dream you've been delaying? Is it energy, the willingness to rise early, stay late, sweat for the life you desire? Is it honesty, the courage to admit you're no longer the same person who began this journey? If Karen held out his hand today, what would you place in it? And could you do so without knowing what waits on the other side? The Greeks believed that once the toll was paid, the ferryman asked no further questions. His role was not to judge or condemn. He simply carried those who had surrendered the price. That detail matters. It reminds us that once you've let go of what holds you back, you don't need to prove yourself again and again. The act of release is enough. Too often, we pay our tolls in life, but then keep trying to justify them. We second-guess, replay, ask, was it worth it? Did I do the right thing? But the myth whispers, if you've paid, you are already across. The toll is not a punishment. It is the door. And so, when you hand over your coin, whatever form it takes, do not grieve forever. Do not clutch at what you gave away. Trust that the price has bought you passage, and the boat is already gliding into the current. Because across the river, something new waits, not easier, not gentler, but new. And that is the gift of the toll. It proves you were brave enough to let go. The first bridge takes something from you. It strips away the weight of what you can no longer keep. But the second bridge, it asks for something far more difficult, the truth. In the Greek imagination, once a soul crossed the river and stepped onto the far shore, it did not walk into silence. It entered a vast open space, stone underfoot, sky stretching endlessly above. And there, in that solemn hall, 3 figures waited, Minos, Rhadamanthys, and Aeacus, the judges of the dead. They were not there to humiliate. They were not there to trick. They were there to listen. Your life, every word spoken, every action taken, every silence kept was laid bare. No defense lawyer, no excuses, no distractions. The story of your life spoke louder than any argument you could make. Imagine standing there, not before mythical judges in marble robes, but before yourself. Not the self you present to the world, polished and composed, but the self that remembers everything, every compromise, every moment of cowardice, every kindness, every cruelty. That is the second bridge. And we don't need marble halls to know what it feels like. We've all faced moments when the mirror demanded honesty. It's the quiet ache when you ask, am I living the life I truly want? It's the sleepless night when you replay your choices and wonder if you have become the person you once promised yourself you'd be. It's the sting of recognizing not what others think of you, but what you think of yourself. That is judgment not from the world outside, but from the soul within. The Greeks understood how terrifying this could be. That's why they placed judgment only after the first crossing. You could not even reach the judges until you had already let go of the past. Only then, lighter, stripped of distractions, could you stand in truth. I've known moments like this moments when I had to admit the way I was living no longer matched the person I wanted to become. It was humbling, uncomfortable, sometimes devastating. But necessary, because until you face yourself, you cannot move on. The second bridge teaches us that denial is a prison. We can hide behind illusions for years pretending we are fine, pretending our choices are noble, pretending our mistakes never happened. But the moment comes when the masks fall. And when they do, we see clearly the truth may sting, but it also frees. In myth, the judges did not always condemn. If your life showed courage and kindness, they might send you to the Elysian, fields a place of rest and beauty. If you had lived carelessly, but without great harm, you might wander the asphodel meadows neutral, grey, neither joy nor torment. And if you had lived with cruelty, with no remorse, then Tartarus awaited a pit of punishment as deep as the sky is high. It's tempting to see these places as threats or rewards. But I think the Greeks meant something subtler. The second bridge was not about shame, it was about clarity. It forced you to see the pattern of your life for what it truly was. And that same bridge appears in our daily lives. When you admit a habit has controlled you for too long. When you confess to yourself that the career you've built doesn't align with who you are. When you stop blaming others and whisper, I chose this path and I can choose differently. That is standing before the judges. That is the second bridge. The danger is not condemnation, it is avoidance. Many never cross because they cannot bear to see themselves without illusions. And so, like the myths say, they drift in asphodel, not punished, not rewarded, but lost in a grey half-life. But those who have the courage to face themselves, they step lighter. They carry no lies into the next chapter. And they discover that honesty is not the end of the road, it is the beginning of transformation. So let me ask you, if today were your day at the second bridge, what would your story say? Would you be proud to have it read aloud? Would there be chapters you'd wish to rewrite? The good news is this: if you are still breathing, the pen is still in your hand. The second bridge is not only for the dead, it is for the living who dare to stop running from themselves. And once you've crossed it, once you have faced yourself honestly, you are ready. Ready for the final crossing, where you will decide not just who you have been, but who you will become. Most people think the hardest part of judgment is what others will say about you. It isn't. The hardest part is what you will say about you. When you stand on the second bridge, it isn't the marble halls or the robed judges that shake you. It isn't the booming voices or the stern faces. It's the silence. The silence where no one else is speaking, when you realize it is your turn. And there, in that stillness, the question rises, will you tell the truth? And I don't mean the polished truth you post online, the neat story you share at dinner parties, the curated version of yourself designed to impress. I mean the truth you whisper only when you're alone, the truth you've buried under excuses, the truth you've tried to hide even from yourself. The Greeks understood this deeply. That's why, in their myths, judgment wasn't meant to humiliate, it was meant to strip away the masks. Because masks may protect you in life, but they cannot follow you across the bridges. And isn't that what frightens us most? Not the judgment of others, but the memory of our own choices. The times we knew the right thing, but chose what was easy. The moments we looked away when someone needed us to stand firm. The compromises we made, telling ourselves it doesn't matter, while knowing it did. That is what echoes at the second bridge. Courage, then, is the key. Not the courage to fight battles or climb mountains, but the quieter, fiercer courage of sitting alone with your own reflection and not turning away. I've known moments like this. Moments when I admitted I had avoided the hard work. Moments when I confessed I had hurt people not by accident, but knowing full well it might happen. Moments when I saw clearly that the gap between the person I pretended to be and the person I was had grown too wide. It was humbling, painful, uncomfortable, and yet something shifted the moment I spoke the truth, even if no one else ever heard it. The weight began to lift. That is the paradox of the second bridge. We think telling the truth will destroy us, but hiding it, that is what destroys us slowly. The Greeks knew the soul could move forward even if its past was imperfect. But it had to own its story first. In our daily lives, this looks different for each of us. It may be finally acknowledging that the career you've built no longer brings pride, only exhaustion. It may be admitting the relationship you present as perfect has cracks you can no longer ignore. It may be looking at yourself and saying, I am not the person I want to be, but I can become them. This kind of honesty requires a different kind of bravery. Because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you've spoken it, you are responsible for what you do next. That is the unspoken challenge of the second bridge. Will you carry the same shadows into your future? Or will you step forward lighter, nothing left to hide? The Greeks imagined 3 outcomes. Those who faced themselves fully might pass into brighter realms, the Elysian fields, filled with joy. Those who refused drifted in the grey meadows of asphodel, stuck between meaning and emptiness. And those who lived without remorse, blind to their truth, sank into Tartarus, where denial itself became torment. Notice this. The real danger wasn't punishment, it was stagnation. To drift endlessly, unable to move forward, is perhaps the cruelest fate of all, and maybe that's true for us as well. If we refuse to face our truth, life becomes a grey meadow. Not a disaster, not a triumph, just a long, dull wandering. But if we have the courage to see clearly, Even when it hurts, something else happens. The path brightens, the air clears. The next bridge begins to take shape. So let me ask you, if you stripped away the masks, if you spoke the truth without flinching, what would you see? Would you be proud, or would you know it is time to change? Here is the gift of this bridge. If you are alive, breathing, heart still beating, you can change. You can rewrite. You can decide that the story you've told so far is not the final chapter. That is why the second bridge matters. It is not there to shame you. It is there to prepare you. Because only when you carry your truth honestly can you walk toward the third bridge, the one that will ask not only who you are, but what you will carry into forever. The first bridge took away what you could no longer keep. The second bridge stripped away your illusions, forcing you to face yourself. And now you stand at the third. This one is different. Here, no ferryman waits with an open hand. No judges stand, ready with scrolls and questions. Here, you are alone. And before you flow to rivers. One is the river Lethe. Drink from it, and every memory dissolves every triumph, every mistake, every heartbreak, a clean slate. The other is the river Mnemosyne. Drink from it, and every memory sharpens every joy, every sorrow, every lesson carried forward intact. The choice is yours. In Greek myth, this decision determined the very shape of your rebirth. Drink from Lethe, and you return to the world without memory, free from the burden of the past but also condemned to repeat its lessons. Drink from Mnemosyne, and you carry the entire weight of your history, the wisdom, and the wounds into your next life. At first, it sounds simple. Who wouldn't want to forget the griefs, the failures, the shame, to step forward light, unscarred? But think carefully. If you forget the heartbreak, you lose the tenderness it taught you. If you erase the mistakes, you lose the wisdom they carved into you. This is why the Greeks saw the third bridge as the soul's final test. It wasn't about loss or honesty anymore. It was about choice. What kind of traveler do you want to be in the life ahead? One who begins fresh but blind, or one who carries the past as both burden and guide? And here's the haunting truth. We face this choice more often than we think. When you leave a relationship, do you erase it from memory, telling yourself it never mattered? Or do you keep the lessons, the tenderness, even the pain, as guideposts for the future? When you fail at something, do you bury it deep, pretending it never happened? Or do you study it, let it shape you, even if it stings? Every time we choose whether to remember or to forget, we are standing at our own third bridge. I've been there. There were seasons of my life when forgetting seemed easier, when I longed to close the book and never look back. And sometimes that forgetting was necessary because carrying every wound forever can crush a soul. We cannot hold the whole world in our hands. But I there also discovered that the memories I chose to keep, the ones I wanted most to throw away, were the very ones that shaped me most deeply. They became the compass I carried into the storms ahead. The Greeks honored those who drank from Mnemosyne. They believed the bravest souls were the ones willing to remember to accept the pain and still move forward. Because only by remembering could you grow beyond what you had been. Forgetting, they feared, was freedom without direction. And yet they did not condemn those who chose Lethe, for sometimes mercy lies in forgetting. Sometimes the soul is too weary too heavy to carry the past into another life. Forgetting offered rest, even if it also meant beginning again from the same lessons. That's the beauty and the danger of this bridge. There is no punishment. Only reflection. The river you choose becomes the life you live. So let me ask you, if you stood at the edge of these waters, which cup would you raise? Would you choose the clean slate of Lethe, stepping into the unknown unburdened, but unshaped? Or would you drink from Mnemosyne, carrying both scars and wisdom as your inheritance? The third bridge reminds us that what we carry matters. Not everything deserves to follow us. Not every memory is a treasure. Some are chains that must be broken. But neither can we discard everything, for without memory we stumble in circles. In our own lives, we practice this balance constantly. We let go of bitterness, but keep the lesson. We release the betrayal, but keep the knowledge of who we can trust. We set down the grief, but carry the love that remains. The soul's final choice is not just about the afterlife. It is about how we live here and now. Because every day we decide what part of our story will live with us into tomorrow and what part we will finally release to the water. And maybe that is the real point of the myth. Not to frighten us with death, but to teach us that every ending is a crossroads. Every chapter asks, will you carry this forward, or will you let it drift away? So as you stand at your own bridge today, tomorrow, years from now, remember, the rivers are already flowing. The choice is already before you. And what you decide will shape not only who you become after death, but who you are in this very moment. When we hear the word rebirth, most of us imagine something mystical. A final curtain falling, a last heartbeat fading, and then somewhere far beyond another beginning. Something reserved for the afterlife, distant and untouchable, but the ancient Greeks, they saw it differently. For them, the soul-est journey across the three bridges wasn't only a map for what happens after death. It was also a mirror for the living. Every time you cross one of life's bridges, letting go, facing yourself, making a choice, you are reborn. Not later. Not someday. Now, think about the last time you went through a major change. Maybe it was leaving a job you thought you'd hold forever. Maybe it was ending a relationship that had defined you for years. Maybe it was moving somewhere new, starting again with nothing but your own hands. When you stepped into that new chapter, didn't you feel it? The old self falling away like a skin shed. The world around you shifting, colors sharper, sounds louder. You weren't the same person anymore. You thought differently. You felt differently. You carried yourself differently. That's right, there is rebirth. The Greeks understood that life and death are not opposite ends of a straight line. They are two sides of the same door. And you don't have to wait until the end of your life to open it. Cross the first bridge in life, and you shed an old skin. Cross the second, and you face the truth about who you really are. Cross the third, and you decide which pieces of your story will live on and which will sink beneath the waters forever. That is the same journey the soul takes in death. The only difference, you can walk it again and again while you are alive. This is why people who have faced deep loss or struggle often speak as if they have lived more than one life. In a way, they have. The person they were before is gone. The person they are now exists because they crossed those bridges, whether they recognized it at the time or not. And here is the hidden beauty of this truth. If rebirth can happen now, then every challenge becomes an opportunity. That doesn't mean it is easy. The Greeks never said the bridges were comfortable. They said they were necessary. You cannot be reborn without leaving something behind. You cannot grow without confronting your reflection. You cannot step into the future without deciding what you will carry forward. I have seen people resist this truth for years. They tell themselves, "I'll change when the time is right." They wait for a perfect moment, a sign, a guarantee. But the bridges don't appear on a schedule. They appear when they appear, sometimes without warning. And when they do, the choice is always the same: stand still or step forward. So maybe the question isn't, what happens after I die? Maybe the question is, how many times can I be reborn before I die? Because every rebirth brings you closer to the person you are meant to be. Every crossing lightens your soul, sharpens your vision, clarifies your path. And the more times you cross, the freer you become. The Greeks gave us a gift in these myths, a way to see endings not as failures, but as beginnings. When you lose something, it isn't just gone, it is making space for what comes next. When you face the truth, it isn't to punish yourself, it is to free yourself. When you choose what to carry forward, you are shaping not only the story of your life, but the story you will leave behind. So let me ask you, if today could be the day of your next rebirth, what would you leave behind? And who would you become on the other side? Because rebirth isn't a promise reserved for another world. It is a door you can walk through as many times as you dare, right here in this life. The ancient Greeks did not leave us only a myth about the afterlife. They left us a blueprint. The 3 bridges were not random inventions, not fanciful decorations of the imagination. They were stages deliberate, purposeful. A sequence for transformation. A framework for how the soul moves, not just beyond death, but through life itself. Think of it this way: the 3 bridges are not just mythic thresholds in a shadowy underworld. They are steps every human being must take, again and again, as long as we breathe. The first bridge, letting go in myth, it was the crossing over the dark river, leaving the world of the living behind. But in life, it is the moment you release what you can no longer hold. Sometimes that is a habit, one you've carried for years, even though you know it drains you. Sometimes it is an identity you've called yourself by one name, one role, one title, but it no longer fits the person you are becoming. Sometimes it is simply comfort the routines that once kept you safe, but now keep you stuck. This bridge asks a piercing question: what is weighing me down? What am I willing to leave behind so I can move forward? Without letting go, you remain on the shore, clutching at stones that cannot carry you across. The first bridge teaches us that growth begins not by adding more, but by releasing what no longer serves. The second bridge, facing the truth. In myth, it was the hall of judgment, where every choice was weighed, every silence examined. In life, it is the moment you stop lying to yourself. Here, the question is not about what you've lost, but about who you are. Who am I, really? Am I willing to own that truth, both the noble parts and the shadowed ones, so that I can become something more? Without this crossing, you drag the same illusions into your future. You repeat the same mistakes because you refuse to name them. The second bridge shows us that honesty is not cruelty, it is the foundation of change. The third bridge, choosing what to carry in myth, it was the choice between lethe and mnemosyne, forget or remember. In life, it is the moment you decide which lessons, which memories, which values you will carry into the next chapter. This bridge asks, what will I take with me? And what will I finally, mercifully, set down? Without this choice, you risk repeating your story endlessly, trapped in cycles that teach the same lesson again and again. The third bridge shows us that the future is not built from everything, it is built from what you choose. Now, put these three bridges together, and you have a cycle: release, reflect, rebuild. Release what no longer serves you. Reflect on who you are with unflinching honesty. Rebuild by carrying forward only what strengthens you. This is not a one-time ritual. It is the rhythm of a human life. You will walk these bridges many times. Each time, the toll will feel different. Each time, the truth will cut in a new place. Each time, the choice will reshape you. The Greeks would say this is how the soul evolves, not in a straight line, but in spirals. Each crossing returns you to the same questions, but at a deeper level. Each crossing makes you lighter, wiser, freer. So how do you know where you are right now? Ask yourself, am I clinging to something I know I should release? Gives you are at the first bridge. Am I avoiding a truth I know I must face? Gives you are standing at the second bridge. Am I uncertain about what belongs in my future and what must be left behind? Gives you are at the third bridge. Once you know where you stand, the path becomes clearer. And here is the best part. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. The bridges don't appear on a calendar. They don't announce themselves with signs in the sky. They appear when life decides it's time, or when your soul whispers that it's ready. And when they do, the choice will always be the same: stand still or step forward. Stepping forward may feel small. It may look ordinary: quitting the job, telling the truth, walking away, starting again. But in the language of the Greeks, every step across a bridge is a step toward transformation. So perhaps the real wisdom of the myth is this: you don't need to wait until death to cross. You can walk the bridges today. You can live this framework now. Because every crossing, no matter how small, remakes you. And the more often you walk them, the more fully alive you become. The Greeks were not the only ones to imagine a journey after death. In fact, if you look across time and geography, you'll find their three bridges echoed in stories told half a world away, cultures that never shared a language, a border, or a map. And yet, their visions of the afterlife resonate with uncanny familiarity. Take ancient Persia, for example. They spoke of the Chinvat Bridge, a span every soul had to cross. For the righteous, it widened into a broad road leading to paradise. For the wicked, it narrowed to the width of a blade, and they slipped into darkness. Different gods, different symbols, yet the same essential idea: a crossing, a test, and a destination shaped by how you lived. Or consider the Norse. In their mythology, there was Bifrost, the rainbow bridge stretching between Midgard, the world of men, and Asgard, the realm of the gods. Heroes who died in battle could walk it, led by Valkyries, to reach Valhalla, the hall of the honored dead. But not everyone could cross. The bridge was guarded. It was reserved for the worthy. Again, we find the same truth. a crossing that separates what was from what can be. And in the East, Tibetan Buddhism speaks of the Bardhoan in-between state after death. The Bardo Fiddle, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes visions, challenges, and opportunities for enlightenment. It is not a literal bridge, but the steps are familiar: letting go, facing truth, and making a choice that determines the path ahead. Why does this idea appear again and again? Why do cultures separated by oceans and centuries imagine so similarly? Maybe because crossing is a universal human experience. We've all stood at the edge of something, a decision, a change, a loss, and felt that stepping forward would transform us forever. And across cultures, that threshold has been given form: a bridge, a river, a path, a gate. The details shift. In Persia, the bridge expands or narrows. In Norse lands, it shines as a rainbow across the sky. In Tibet, it is a passage through visions and trials of the mind. In Greece, it is 3 spans of stone and mist across dark rivers. But the essence remains. The soul must move, and in moving, it is measured. When I first learned of these parallels, it struck me as more than coincidence. If so many peoples, in so many times, imagine such crossings, perhaps they were not only speaking of death, perhaps they were speaking of life itself. Think about it. The Chinvat, bridge widening or narrowing, that is life responding to who you have been. Do your habits, choices, and actions open your path, or do they narrow it until there is no room left? Bifrost's guarded span, that is the truth, that not every opportunity is open to everyone at all times. Some doors, some paths, must be earned. The Bardo's visions, that is the mind itself, reflecting fears and hopes when change comes faster than we are ready for. Different symbols, same human truth. And this tells us something profound. Humans everywhere have felt the same need. The need to make sense of endings. The need to believe that moving forward is not random, but shaped by who we are and what we have done. It is not only the Greeks who saw bridges in the soul's path. It is humanity itself. And that is why the Greek myth of the 3 bridges still matters. Because in its stones, in its rivers, in its judges, we hear not just one culture's imagination, but an echo of something, deeper something humans everywhere have whispered to each other for thousands of years. The details may change, but the story endures. Every soul must cross. Every crossing tests us, and no one returns unchanged. So the next time you find yourself standing at your own bridge, remember you are not alone. From Persia to Norway to Tibet, people have told themselves the same story. The crossings are universal. The forms differ, but the call is the same: step forward. And maybe that's the most important echo of all. That across time, across cultures, across every border, humans have always known transformation requires movement. And the bridge, whatever name it takes, always waits. No one crosses the bridges entirely alone, not in Greek myth, not in life. In the ancient Greek imagination, certain figures walked beside the soul. Hermes, the messenger god, bore a second title, Psychopompos, the guide of souls. He did not judge, he did not condemn. His role was not to weigh your worth, but simply to lead you from one stage to the next. He carried the torch in the darkness, ensuring the soul did not lose its way. There were others, too. Orpheus, the musician who once entered the underworld, not by divine duty, but by love. With nothing but his lyre, he sought to bring back Eurydice. He failed, but his story reminded the Greeks that sometimes love itself can guide us through the shadows. Even in myths where the journey seemed solitary, there were helpers, a hand on your shoulder, a voice in the dark, a presence that said, "You do not walk alone." And isn't that true for us as well? Think back to the first bridge you crossed in life, the letting go. Wasn't there someone who gave you courage? A friend who whispered, "It's okay to start over." A mentor who reminded you of your worth when you had forgotten it. Even a stranger whose words, spoken once, stayed with you in the quiet of your heart. Guides do not always stay for the whole journey. Hermes escorted the soul to its threshold, but he did not walk every bridge. Orpheus reached the edge of hope, but then vanished into his own tragedy. In our lives, too, some guides appear only for a chapter. They walk beside us for a time, then step back into their own story, and yet their brief presence can change everything. Sometimes the guide is not even a person. It is a book whose words pierce you in just the right moment, leaving you unable to see the world the same way again. It is a piece of music that carries you through grief, one note at a time. It is a memory of your grandmother's voice, of a teacher's faith that steadies you when the bridge shakes under your feet. But here's the truth: a guide can only point the way. They cannot take the steps for you. Hermes could lead the soul to the riverbank, but he could not place the coin in Charon's hand. Orpheus could reach for Eurydice, but she had to walk behind him of her own accord. In our lives, a friend can show us the truth, but they cannot force us to face it. A mentor can remind us of our strength, but only we can decide to use it. That is why the Greeks valued gratitude toward guides, but also personal responsibility. The bridges belong to the soul. No one can walk them on your behalf. And yet, how often we underestimate the power of guides. I have had mine. The teacher who saw in me something I could not yet see. The friend who spoke hard truths I had avoided for years. The quiet places in nature that reminded me of my smallness and my belonging all at once. Even the losses, the heartbreaks painful though they were, became guides of their own, pushing me toward crossings I would never have chosen voluntarily. Guides are not always gentle. Hermes could be kind, but he could also be firm. Sometimes the guide is the challenge, itself the job, that collapses. The relationship that ends, the failure that forces you to move. At the time, you may curse it. Later, you see it was a hand on your back, urging you toward the bridge you were meant to cross. So let me ask you, who have been your guides? Who has stood beside you at the edge of change? And equally important, who are you guiding now? Because the Greeks would remind us, guidance is not reserved for gods and heroes. Every soul, at some point, will walk beside another. A parent who tells a child, "You are stronger than you think." A friend who sits quietly while you grieve. A stranger whose kindness makes the unbearable just a little more bearable. We forget, sometimes, that our presence can be someone else's Hermes. That our words, casual though they may seem, can be the lantern someone carries into their own darkness. And that changes the way we see our journey. Because it means we are not only travelers across the bridges, we are also companions. We are not only carried, we also carry. The Greeks understood this duality. Every soul needs a guide, and every soul is, in time, a guide. That is the rhythm of the journey. And maybe that is the most humbling lesson of all. The bridges are yours to cross, but they are never only yours. Every culture tells stories about the afterlife. But in Greek myth, the bridges were more than a road for the soul. They were a mirror for values, a way of asking what really matters in a life. The Greeks did not imagine the journey as some random obstacle course, a game invented by the gods for their amusement. No, their myth was deliberate. Each bridge was designed to measure three things: justice, courage, and wisdom. These were not abstract virtues. They were the compass by which the soul could find its way. Justice, the second bridge, the hall of judgment, made one truth clear: what you do matters. Not in the sense of cosmic bookkeeping, where every deed is tallied like coins in a ledger, but in the deeper sense that actions shape outcomes, choices echo. If you lived with cruelty, that cruelty became your shadow. If you lived with kindness, that kindness shaped the world around you and shaped you in return. The judges did not ask what you believed. They asked how you lived. And isn't that still true? Justice shows up in the way we treat people when there is nothing in it for us. It is the choice to be fair when no one is watching. It is the courage to make amends when we have caused harm. The Greeks understood, without justice, the soul becomes lost. A life without fairness corrodes itself from within. Courage. The first bridge is an act of bravery, leaving behind what you know even when it is no longer good for you is one of the hardest things a human can do. The Greeks celebrated courage not only in battlefields but in the quiet, invisible moments. The farmer who risks change to plant a new crop. The mother who protects her child at great cost. The citizen who speaks truth to power, though his voice shakes. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is movement in spite of it. That is why the soul could not step onto the first bridge without it. You cannot carry safety into transformation. And in our own world, courage still whispers in small acts, telling the truth when silence would be easier. Standing up for someone who has no defender. Taking the first step when the road ahead is still covered in mist. Without courage, the soul never leaves the shore. Wisdom, the third bridge, is the test of discernment, choosing what to carry, what to leave behind. Wisdom is not about knowing everything. It is about knowing what matters. The Greeks feared two extremes, remembering too much and remembering too little. To carry every wound is to be crushed by the weight. To forget every lesson is to repeat the same mistakes forever. Wisdom is balance. It is the art of holding on to what strengthens you and setting down what weakens you. It is choosing which stories will define you and which you will allow to dissolve. In life, wisdom might look like this, keeping the memory of a failure as a teacher, but not as a chain. Remembering a betrayal enough to be cautious, but not so much that it poisons your trust. Choosing gratitude over bitterness, even when you remember the wound. Without wisdom, the soul staggers under either too much or too little. The Greeks knew these three: justice, courage, wisdom were not ornamental ideals. They were survival skills for the soul. Without justice, you lost your way. Without courage, you never took the step. Without wisdom, you carried either too much or too little into the next life. And here is the powerful part. These values were not meant only for the afterlife. They were meant for here. For now, for the crossings we face daily. Because whether or not you believe in rivers and judges, the truth is this: every time you step into the unknown, you need courage. Every time you choose how to treat another, you need justice. Every time you decide what to keep and what to release, you need wisdom. So let me ask you, if you stood on the first bridge today, would courage walk beside you? If you stood in the judge's hall, could you say you lived with justice? If you stood at the waters of Lethe and Mnemosyne, would wisdom guide your choice? The Greeks would tell you this: if you live with these three companions here, the bridges whether in this life or the next will not frighten you, they will welcome you. And maybe that is the deepest lesson. That the moral compass of the ancient world is not ancient at all. It is still pointing us forward, asking us to walk our bridges with justice in our hearts, courage in our steps, and wisdom in our hands. For much of this journey, we've imagined the bridges as places out there, stone spans across shadowy rivers, guarded by ferrymen and judges, lit only by torches in the underworld. But what if I told you the bridges have always been inside you? Think about it. When you let go of something you thought you could never live without, that was the first bridge. When you faced the truth about yourself, even when it hurt, that was the second. When you chose which lessons, which memories, which scars to carry into your next chapter, that was the third. You didn't cross them in marble halls or misty caverns. You crossed them in your own heart. The Greeks, for all their myths and poetry, understood that the real journey was inward. The rivers, the judges, the gates, they were symbols. They gave form to something every soul experiences, the thresholds of change, the transformations of the self. You don't need to die to stand at the first bridge. It appears in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, when a decision falls into your lap and you know nothing will ever be the same. You don't need to meet a god to face the second bridge. It's there every time you catch your own reflection and realize you can keep lying to yourself. And you don't need to drink from an ancient river to reach the third. It happens every time you decide what belongs in your future and what must be left behind in the past. And here is the power of seeing the bridges inside you. It changes how you walk your life. You stop waiting for fate to call your number. You stop thinking transformation is reserved for some distant afterlife. You realize you are walking this path right now. Every day gives you a chance to release something, to face yourself, to choose your future. Some crossings are small: the decision to break an old habit, to forgive someone, to try again. Others are enormous: the loss of a loved one, the end of a marriage, the discovery of who you really are after years of hiding. But each is a bridge. Each asks you to step forward. That's why the bridges show up in so many cultures under so many different names. Because no matter what we believe, no matter where we come from, we all feel it. The inner crossings, the thresholds within. I've known this in my own life. Times when the bridge appeared quietly, almost invisibly, and I crossed without even naming it. And times when the bridge loomed like a mountain, and I trembled at its edge for months before I dared to step. Looking back, I see them clearly now. Each bridge was not outside me, it was within me, waiting for the moment I was ready to cross. And here's the most humbling truth. Once you see the bridges inside yourself, you gain a priceless gift. You can prepare for the next crossing before it even arrives. If you know the first bridge is about letting go, you can start asking now, what am I holding that holds me back? If you know the second is about truth, you can start practicing honesty with yourself before life forces it on you. If you know the third is about choosing what to carry, you can begin deciding today which memories, which values, which scars will shape your future. Some people fear the bridges because they imagine them as distant, strange, and final. But when you realize they are part of your story already, the fear begins to soften. They are not here to end you. They are here to transform you. So, maybe the question isn't, will I be ready when I die? Maybe the question is, am I ready for the bridge that is in front of me right now? Because the way you cross the bridges inside you will shape how you cross any bridge beyond you. And that is the paradox the Greeks left us. They clothed their wisdom in myth rivers and judges, ferrymen and fields of shadow. But beneath the poetry was a truth as sharp today as it was 2,500 years ago. Every soul carries its own bridges. Every life is already a series of crossings. You do not need to search the underworld to find them. You need only look inward. We've walked together through the 3 bridges. We've stood at the riverbank, coin in hand. We've faced the judges and heard our own story laid bare. We've stood between forgetting and remembering, deciding what to carry forward. And now, the question is simple, yet sharper than any blade. Are you ready to cross? Readiness is a tricky thing. We like to believe we'll know when the time comes that there will be a sign, a perfect alignment of stars, a voice whispering from the sky. Now, step forward. But the truth? The bridges rarely wait for your sense of readiness. They appear when they appear. Sometimes they arrive disguised as endings you didn't choose. A job you lose, a friendship that dissolves, a door that closes without warning. Sometimes they arrive as opportunities you're afraid to take, a chance that calls you beyond the familiar. A path that frightens you because it is new, because it is uncertain. The Greeks understood this. That's why, in their stories, the soul never lingered for weeks or months once it stood before a bridge. The choice was immediate. You are ready or you are not. And if you are not, you stay behind. In life, staying behind doesn't always look like failure. It often looks ordinary. It looks like playing it safe. It looks like putting off the conversation you know you need to have. It looks like saying, maybe next year, over and over until years blur into decades and the bridge fades into mist. Here's what I've learned. Fear never truly disappears. You can wait 1 year, 5 years, a lifetime, and the bridge will still feel uncertain. The difference between those who cross and those who do not is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to carry fear with them to the other side. So ask yourself, where are you standing now? Are you still clinging to the shore of the first bridge, holding on to something you know is already gone? Are you frozen at the second, afraid to admit a truth that could free you? Or are you standing at the third, still undecided about what belongs in your future and what must be set down? Wherever you are, the bridges do not move. They wait, but they do not wait forever. In Greek myth, the bridges were destiny. Every soul faced them without exception. In life, the bridges are invitations. You can accept them or ignore them, but they do not stand open endlessly. If you refuse long enough, they vanish back into the mist, and it may take years before another appears. That is why the question matters. Not as a poetic riddle, but as a real, urgent call. If your bridge appeared tonight, no warning, no extra time would you step forward. Would you release the weight you've carried too long? Would you face yourself without flinching? Would you know what to take with you and what to leave behind? Because readiness is not about certainty. It is not about waiting for the fear to vanish or the path to light itself completely. Readiness is about deciding that the cost of staying the same is greater than the cost of change. The Greeks told these stories so that when the moment came, whether in this life or the next, you would recognize it, not as punishment, not as loss, but as a crossing. And maybe they told them for this reason too, so that you would not waste your chance. So let me ask you again, not as myth, not as metaphor, but as a question meant for this very moment. If your bridge appeared tonight, would you step forward? Because in the end, the bridges do not care about readiness. They care only about willingness. We have walked through the ancient gates together over the first bridge of letting go, across the second of truth, and to the third where memory and forgetting meet. We have seen the ferryman's hand, felt the weight of the toll in our palm. We have stood under the eyes of the judges and heard the echo of our own story. We have looked into two rivers, each carrying a different future. And now, here we are. The myth leaves the soul standing at this place just one step away from the unknown. And I have one question for you. Will you take the step? The Greeks believed that at this moment right before the crossing something powerful happens. Time slows, the air feels heavier. Every sense sharpens, as though the soul knows the next heartbeat will change everything. And this is not only about the afterlife, it is about now. Because somewhere in your life you are already standing on your own bridge. Maybe it is the bridge of a career, change the secure path behind you, the uncertain calling ahead. Maybe it is the bridge of a relationship, ending love lingering on one shore, the possibility of freedom and growth on the other. Maybe it is the bridge of a truth long avoided, an admission that will alter everything, even if it breaks the silence you've kept for years. And just like in the Greek story, no one can walk it for you. You may have guides, mentors, friends who encourage you, but the step itself only you can take it. Here is the part no one says out loud. The fear will never fully disappear. You don't cross because you stop being afraid. You cross because you decide the cost of staying the same is greater than the cost of change. That is why the Greeks placed such weight on the moment before the step. It is here, at the very edge, that the soul measures not its readiness, but its willingness. Readiness is a feeling fragile, shifting, uncertain. Willingness is a choice. It is the act of saying, even if I am afraid, I will step. Think about the times you've stood at the edge but stayed on the shore. The job you didn't apply for because you weren't qualified enough. The conversation you avoided because you feared its outcome. The dream you delayed because the timing wasn't perfect. We've all been there. And we all know, deep down, that perfect timing is a myth. The Greeks understood this too. That is why in their stories, hesitation was dangerous. Souls that lingered too long at the riverbank risked fading into shadows, trapped between what was and what could be. They feared limbo more than death itself because to be stuck forever on the shore was to never live at all. So here is the challenge. Stop waiting for the bridge to feel safe. It is not meant to feel safe. It is meant to transform you. When you step onto it, you are declaring to yourself and to the world, I am willing to change. I am willing to grow. I am willing to walk into the unknown to find the life I am meant to live. And that declaration matters more than certainty. In the next part of our journey, we will step out of myth for a moment. We will talk about what it means to live these bridges every day in work, in love, in the quiet battles no one else sees. Because if a story remains only in the past, it is just entertainment. But if you live it, now if you cross your bridges with courage, then the story becomes transformation. So once more, I leave you with the question the Greeks would have whispered at the edge of every crossing. Will you take the step? It is easy to imagine the bridges as something distant set in a mythic underworld of gods, rivers, and marble halls. Easy to think they are only for the dead, waiting at the far horizon of life. But here is the truth. You have been crossing them all along. The Greeks gave them names and stories. But you already know their shape. They live in the choices you make, the endings you survive, the beginnings you dare to embrace. In work, the first bridge is the moment you leave behind security for growth. It is resigning from the job that pays the bills but starves your spirit. It is stepping into a calling that both excites and terrifies you. The second bridge appears when you face your reflection honestly, when feedback cuts deep. When you admit your weaknesses, when you acknowledge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And the third bridge, it is choosing what lessons to carry forward. The skills that strengthen you, the values that define you, the insights that will guide your next chapter while leaving behind the habits, the mistakes, the patterns that no longer serve. I have seen entire teams cross these bridges without realizing it, a company abandoning outdated practices, a leader facing uncomfortable truths, a group deciding which traditions to keep and which to release. Each choice was a crossing. In relationships, the first bridge is letting go of what is toxic, even when love still lingers like smoke after a fire. The second bridge is facing the truth of how you have shown up, owning the moments when you withheld affection, when you chose silence over honesty, when you allowed fear to speak louder than love. And the third bridge is choosing what to carry forward. Do you take with you bitterness and suspicion, or do you take trust, vulnerability, and respect into your future connections? I've met people who clung to relationships long after they ended in spirit. They feared the first bridge. But when they finally stepped across, they discovered not only freedom, but clarity. Only then could they build again on firmer ground. In the inner life, perhaps the most difficult crossings happen within. The first bridge is shedding an old identity, the you once thought permanent. Maybe it was the achiever, the pleaser, the skeptic. One day you realize that skin no longer fits, and you must set it down. The second bridge is staring into the hidden corners of yourself, admitting what you'd rather ignore, the jealousy, the fear, the pride, the longing. And the third bridge is deciding which parts of yourself you will nurture and which you will release. Will you carry forward resentment, or will you carry compassion? Will you choose cynicism or hope? Every true breakthrough I've had in my own life began here, in the quiet crossings no one else could see. When you begin to recognize the bridges in your everyday life, something shifts. You stop fearing endings because you realize endings are disguised beginnings. You stop avoiding truth because you know it is the only key to freedom. You start making choices not just for today's comfort, but for tomorrow's growth. The Greeks gave us a map for the soul. But it is also a map for living well. And here is the most beautiful part. These bridges are never closed. If you missed a crossing once, another will appear. Life will circle back, offering you chance after chance to step forward. You are never beyond the possibility of change. But the question remains, will you take it? Because while the bridges may appear again, they will not wait forever. Each crossing comes with its own urgency, its own invitation. Refused to many, and life can become like asphodels meadow grey, dull, neither joy nor torment. So here is the challenge. Look around you today. Is there a bridge waiting at your feet? Is it the job you know you must leave? The truth you must finally admit? The memory you must either carry with honor or release into the water? Do not wait for the mythic afterlife to walk across. The bridges are already here. And the more often you cross them, the more fully alive you will become. We have stood at the edge of each bridge, in story and in spirit. We have spoken of the tolls you must pay, the truths you must face, the choices you must make. And now there is only one thing left to decide. Will you walk? In the Greek mind, the soul that lingered too long at the threshold risked fading into the shadowlands neither here nor there. Caught forever between what was and what might have been. They feared this limbo more than death itself. Death was a passage. Limbo was paralysis. And maybe you know this feeling already. The dream you've carried for years but never acted upon. The words you never spoke. The decision you postponed so many times that the opportunity dissolved into silence. These are our modern shadowlands. Not tragic, not dramatic, just endless waiting. Somewhere, deep inside, you've already heard the call. It may sound like restlessness and ache that will not quiet. It may sound like a whisper at night. There is more than this. It may sound like a sigh you don't even realize you're making. You can try to ignore it. You can drown it in busyness, silence it with distractions, bury it under responsibility. But it returns again and again. And the Greeks would say, that voice is the ferryman calling your name. We live in an age that celebrates comfort, convenience, stability, and there is nothing wrong with comfort. Until it becomes a cage. The Greeks lived in an age that celebrated courage. They knew that comfort builds walls, but courage builds bridges. And courage is precisely what the first step demands. I am not asking you to rush. The bridges are not crossed by sprinting. I am asking you not to wait forever. Because there is a truth we both know. One day the bridge will still be there, but you will not. Time is not an infinite resource. Opportunities are not eternal. There is a clock that ticks quietly beneath every heartbeat, and the bridges know it. Listen for the call. It comes in many forms. In the quiet, before sleep, when your mind wanders to the life you wish you were living. In the pause before a decision, when you know the choice you're about to make will either free you or bind you. In the voice of someone you love, asking you to be braver than you feel. And when it comes, remember, the bridge will not cross itself. I think of people I've known who ignored the call for years, who stayed in jobs they despised, in relationships that drained them, in identities that no longer fit. They told themselves they were being practical, but in truth, they were standing in limbo, watching life pass on the far shore. And I think of those who answered the call, who paid the toll, faced the truth, chose what to carry forward. Their lives were not easier, but they were fuller. They crossed, and on the other side they discovered something new, not freedom from fear, but freedom through fear. So here is the call you cannot ignore. The bridges are waiting. They always are. The question is not whether they exist. The question is whether you will hear the ferryman's voice and step forward while you still can. Because the bridges do not measure perfection. They measure willingness. In our final part, we will return to where this journey began, a whisper older than empires, a belief that the soul must cross 3 bridges to be reborn. And we will ask, one last time, the question that matters most, if not now, when? We began with a whisper carried across centuries. The soul must cross 3 bridges to be reborn. At first, it sounded like a mythian echo from marble temples, a tale woven into bronze mirrors and painted vases. A story whispered at night, as fires burned low and shadows danced against stone. But somewhere along the way, it became about you. The first bridge letting go taught you that some things must be set down if you are to move forward. Old dreams, old skins, old weights that no longer serve you. The second bridge-facing truth showed you that the hardest mirror to look into is the one within, that honesty is not punishment, but liberation. That clarity is the only ground on which to build a new life. The third bridge choosing what to carry revealed that the future is not made from everything, but from the pieces you protect, the lessons you keep, the memories you allow to shape you, and now here you stand. Not in the underworld, not before gods or ferrymen, but in your own life. Yet the bridges are still here, waiting in the quiet spaces of your days. The Greeks believed that every crossing changed the soul forever. That on the far side of each bridge, you were not the same person who stepped onto it, and that was the point. The soul is not meant to remain still. It is meant to move, to evolve, to grow lighter and truer with each passage. Look back at where you began this journey. What weight have you put down since then? What truth have you faced, however uncomfortable? What treasure, love, wisdom, resilience have you chosen to carry forward? If you can answer even one of those questions, you have already crossed something. I cannot promise you the bridges ahead will be easy. They may shake under your feet. The toll may feel steep. The waters below may roar with fear. But I can promise this, they are worth it. Because on the other side is the life you were meant to live, not the life handed to you. Not the life expected of you, but the life chosen with your own hands. And that, the Greeks would say, is what it means to be reborn. The circle closes now. We began with an ancient myth, and we end with a truth that belongs to you. The first bridge reminds you that endings are not failures, they are thresholds. The second bridge reminds you that truth may wound, but it is also the seed of freedom. The third bridge reminds you that the future is not everything, it is only what you choose to carry. Taken together, they are not just a map of death. They are a map of life. So I leave you with this, if not now. When? The bridges are waiting, and so is your rebirth. Take the step. The rest will meet you halfway.